Hello there. Welcome to or welcome back to my channel, Snips by Kelly. I'm Kelly and it's time to hop. It's my favorite time of the month, the second Friday of the month, where I get together with 8 other creative ladies and we each create our take on the same sketch. This month's sketch was by Page Maps and it was chosen by Jessica Dipsinski from over at Paper Heart. And she chose this sketch because hexagons are her favorite. So she said the sketch could be anything favorite. So your favorite technique, your favorite shape, your favorite memory. And I've been working on scrapbooking some amazing photos that I took on a trip to Oregon with my friend Kim and I. And we went on an amazing hike across a suspension bridge to see a little waterfall. And we had a wonderful, wonderful time. And so I have a couple photos here that are going to be true to the sketch. So we're going to take those to 3 by 4.5. I did crop those down on my Picturemate 400. Now here's another layout that I recently created using the Autumn Toile collection. I did a large oversized hidden journal, and these were some of the photos that I had taken from that same hike. And I really wanted to continue with Autumn Toile. I love this collection. In fact, this is another layout I created with this collection with my grandson, Waylon James. So the Autumn Toile collection has the Autumn Trees Stampin' Die bundle as well as the Amber Autumn Stampin' Die bundle. So you can go trees and foliage or you can go pumpkins. And so you can see here some of these parts and pieces. I think the pattern papers are going to work perfect. Now we're going to do our heavy lifting up front. I'm going to grab my Junk Gypsy tray and we're going to grab some foliage here from the Beautiful Motifs die set. I love this die set. I used these dies on the previous layout. So you have this impression die that creates these great interactive leaves that you can fussy cut around. Now I don't actually end up using these on this layout, but I loved them on the last one and I thought that I was going to want that. There's so many great sprigs in this. So I created some sprigs and ferns in Cajun Craze, Mossy Meadow, and Pecan Pie, and I think they're going to be perfect. Now we need a title and a journaling spot, and on this last layout I created this pull out tab using the frames from Branching Out. Now, I love these frames. I really have to get these on my magnets here. I've been so busy lately. So I love these frames. They inset inside each other and they have stitching. They're perfect for journal spots and title spots. And I actually created the words from Words for the Season. So they have all kinds of seasonal words for New Year's, Halloween, Christmas, and fall. And I'm going to create my title out of those. Now, since I'm pulling this out anyway, there's some other little sprigs in there, berry sprigs, there's some pine sprigs. So I did the pine sprigs out of Mossy Meadow and some of the little berry sprigs I did out of Basic Beige. Basic Beige has been like my favorite lately. I thought, why not throw in a few little pine cones since we're using it anyway? And let's see here, what else do we need? We've got our hexagons there. Sometimes I really love to go to my Cricut. I want to open up the parts and pieces of a sketch or create my own sketch. So I've pulled out a 12 by 12 background here, and then I've pulled out what I'm estimating to be what the pattern paper will be on the bottom. And right now I have it at 4 by 11. I do end up stretching that. I bring in my photo mats at 3.5 by 4.5, and then I'm trying to figure out the size of my hexagons. Now I first think that they're going to be like 2 to 2.25, and then I see that it's falling off the page. So I go back and I resize that 2 by 1.75, and that size ends up being perfect. And it really helps me decide if I can use a punch there, or if I can use a die there, or if I need to create a prototype or a little pattern master on the Cricut because it's an odd size. So the landing size that I go for those hexagons is 2 by 1 3/4, and it ends up being perfect. Now there's some stitching also at the bottom of the sketch, and I don't do the sewing stitching, although I love it. I wish that I did. I've tried it before. It's pretty laborious for me, but what I'm going to do is just type in stitched lines, and I'm going to find some stitched lines. I'm going to turn those into the draw. So I want that to be from the draw tool, and I'm going to add those to the bottom and attach those onto my cardstock. That way I can put that in my Cricut, and when I click make it, then I'm able to have that draw my stitching on the bottom. Now, could you do this with a journaling pen? Absolutely. I just love to come to my Cricut to help me sort out my parts and pieces, what size those parts and pieces need to be, and it's such a great way to actually make your own sketch. So I encourage you to try to use your Cricut for lots of other things besides just cutting. It's a great way to put everything out, put all your parts and pieces out, and sort them out. Now, I created those hexagons using that pattern on a variety of the papers. I also thought I need to use my autumn trees. So in the Autumn Toile set that I love, it comes with 2 different bundles if you buy the Sweet Collection, Amber Autumn and Autumn Trees. So let's go ahead and add some deer from the autumn trees, some stones. We're going to stamp a few little pieces to add the autumn tree since it comes in the Sweet Collection anyway. So I'm going to stamp some smaller trees. On the previous layout, I used the gorgeous, gorgeous oversized tree, and I love that so much, but I don't think we need such a large element on this one. I want some stones, I want some deer, and I want the smaller tree, and we'll see if we can incorporate those into the layout. We're going to do some very simple coloring here, or markering here. So I have the dark mossy meadow, and I'm going to come in, I think it's the dark, it might be the light, let me double check that. It's the light mossy meadow, and I'm going to come in on all of the greenery and the grass, and I'm going to draw with that, or marker with that, on the natural lines, and then I'm going to come in with light gray granite for the stones, and then pecan pie. I'm going to come in on the natural lines with dark pecan pie. We're going to do this for the deer, we're going to do this for the trees. For any parts that have brown, we're going to come in with dark pecan pie first, then we're going to come behind that with light pecan pie. So we'll do the wooded pieces of the tree that way, we'll do the deer that way, and I'm only doing a tiny bit of each one just to show you the quick and simple markering that I'm using. I'm not doing any fancy techniques. I'm using the natural lines of the stamp to help me figure out where to put the darker marker, and then coming back in with the lighter marker. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the trees and go in through all the wooded areas. Then I'm going to use dark mossy meadow on the darker parts of the stamp of the tree. That way the leaves can still be the green color, and they're going to be darker in the natural dark spots. And then I'm going to come back in with the light mossy meadow and blend all of that. And you can even use the blending brush side or the paintbrush side. Then we're going to run those through the die cutter. And I believe my junk gypsy tray is full and complete, and I can simply shop my stash now and my parts, and all of the heavy lifting is done. I may need a little something to hold some of the flourishes there in the center, but otherwise I'm feeling happy. Now, I believe that one of the most basic and fundamental elevation techniques for a layout is photo mats. So I have all of these photos that are the 3 by 4.5. 4 of those are vertical on the right, 2 of those are horizontal on the left, and I'm going to go up just 1/8 an inch with a very vanilla, and then another 1/8 of an inch with Cajun craze. Now I did, for the left-hand side, keep that all one piece. So the Cajun Craze is 4 3/4 by 6.5. And then I just went down 1/8 of an inch for the very vanilla. And I got all those done. It's all about getting all the heavy lifting done. So the only thing that's left is to have fun. So on these hexagons, you can use a ruler. I can show you how you can use a ruler. I actually just freehand all of mine. I'm going to add a journaling line with a black journaling pen all the way around each of the hexagons. And then we're going to definitely come back in with some pecan pie ink, and we're going to dirty up or blend ink on the edges of all the parts and pieces. We're going to do that on the hexagons, and then you'll see later on here, I'm going to do that on all of those die cut pieces as well. Now the hexagons are easy. I'm using a mini ink blending tool, and we're just going to blend all the way around and rub a little bit all the way around. But some of these delicate leaves can be difficult to ink because you don't want to tear them. They're so delicate that you need to be a little bit gentle. And if you know me, there's not a whole lot that's gentle about me. I'm like, get her done. And so I pounce. So if you want to just pounce on the edges, you can see how beautiful that makes the edges with that little bit of inking on the edge, and you don't have to worry then about tearing your edges of your delicate pieces. So I actually go through the whole Junk Gypsy tray and I add pecan pie ink to everything. It just really makes it pop. It makes it stand out and gives it a finished edge. Now I'm actually going to pull in my Stampin' Right marker because it's really thin, and I wanted to fill in those stitched lines on the bottom that I created on the Cricut. So now, because I went to the Cricut and I figured out my spacing, I figured out that I really need a 5x11 piece for the base piece of the sketch instead of the 4x11. So rather than cutting that 4x11 and finding out that I needed more, it worked out really great that I went and put my shapes on the Cricut so I could sort that out and not waste paper. It really helped me figure out my sizes and get a visual of what I was going to be doing. So I'm just going to center that on top of the stitched lines with about 1 inch on either side. So I have 2 5x11 pieces. I thought about the busy pattern because on the sketch, it looks like they used a busy pattern, but I ended up flipping it over. I love the early espresso graph. So now I'm just using the sketch itself to lay out some of these hexagons. I originally think I'm going to be using that graph to sort of match the sketch. And then I'm thinking, silly girl, you use the graph as the base, so you're going to use the backside trees for that. So I'm just sort of getting a variety. And if you look at the sketch, they've actually sorted it out between 4 different patterns. So what I've done is I've followed their pattern with their patterns. And so I chose what patterns were going to be represented on there. And then I duplicated them on mine when they were duplicated on the sketch. So now I'm just going to kind of get placement here, and I already know they're going to fit because I figured that out on my Cricut when I was working my sketch out on the Cricut. So I already know that they're going to fit perfectly because I did a dry run or a dress rehearsal on the Cricut. And it really helps me a lot to not mess around with a whole bunch of different punches and dies and, fussy cutting just to find out that they are too large. The hexagons are too large. So now I'm going to go around, and on the left page, I'm going to be really true to the sketch, and I'm going to put those pieces primarily almost identical to where they are on the sketch. And then to stretch the sketch into a companion page, it's going to be so simple this time. I'm going to duplicate the base piece and just simply add a couple more areas where there's hexagons. Boom, done. No overthinking on how I might make that right page into a companion page. Now, a couple of these hexagons are going to be popped up on top, and then a couple of them are going to be tucked under. Now, let's go ahead and grab that stitch stitched framing that I created from the branching out dies. And we're going to add the title to that. So I just like to use a tweezer and my precision glue or my fine tip glue. It works great. So I'm going to go ahead and flip that over. And the words for the season I love because you have so many heartfelt sentiments in that, but you have all of these die cut titles and it makes it great. So I'm going to look here at what all titles we have in that. We have holidays, greetings, Christmas, New Year, Halloween, Merry, Autumn, wishes, and happy. So think of all the combinations. You've got Christmas wishes, autumn wishes, Halloween wishes, happy Halloween, happy Christmas, happy New Year, happy holidays. We have Halloween greetings. We have Christmas greetings, New Year's greetings. We have, oh my goodness, the wishes, the happy, the merry, the greetings, and all of the seasonal. It's so great to have that. And then there's even a little banner, and then there's stamped sentiments out as well. I love that one, and I think I'm going to get great use out of that. So it has a little bit of graduation in the stamped sentiments, a little bit of Christmas, fall, different kinds of seasons and wishes. Now, I know I'm going to need a little bit of journaling. They show on the sketch a little journaling. I'm going to need to fill in with all kinds of foliage and flourishes and all of those parts and pieces that we did when we did the heavy lifting and we filled the junk gypsy tray. This makes it so easy. I love doing this if I'm going to a crop. If I'm going to go to a weekend retreat, sometimes you're kind of distracted at retreats and you also just want to visit and create. It's like you love getting together with all those people and visiting with them. So sometimes it's a little harder to concentrate, for me anyway, on a lot of the heavy lifting. So I love it when I can go to a crop and have all the parts and pieces done ahead of time. So I'll just create all kinds of my parts and my pieces and get a little bit of a plan. I'll cut everything out and put it in individual bags so that I can sit and actually have the culmination and watch my layout come to fruition and still be able to visit and not have to do all that heavy lifting once I get to a crop. So now I'm simply going to stretch the sketch and stretch that pattern across the page and add a few more of those hexagons. So it seems like this is a good landing spot right here on the transition at the top. And then I'll probably go over to the upper left a little bit, maybe with only say 2 or 3 of those hexagons. I love that we can have the neutrals, the basic beige background is the neutrals, and then we even have neutral with the early espresso graph, but where we get our pops of color is going to be in the hexagons. Now, if you don't like hexagons, there are so many shapes you could use in the place of the hexagons. Of course, depending on your theme, you could do circles, you could do stars, like sports pages would have been great with stars. There's so many things that you could do. There's a lot of different punches that don't even have to be a basic shape, like circles, squares, stars, triangles, rectangles. You could use a lot of different punches that have a unique shape that could be your shape within the layout. So now that the hexagons are in place, I did a teeny tiny bit of journaling, not much, because I did that oversized journaling on the last layout that was that in which I was working on this theme. And so I don't need much. I just want a little bit to identify the things that we've done. I'm going to double stack a couple of the stamped trees up there. And I'm going to add a little bit of the skeletal trees, I think, to that and have the stone be the base. I love these little stones with the grass. They just make wonderful little base elements to tuck deer under, to tuck some foliage under. There's a lot of things that you can do with those little stepping stones or stones. So I'm adding a Cajun craze and a basic beige skeletal tree there. You could call it a tree, a branch, a piece of foliage, they just work great for fillers. I'm going to add a couple little pine cones, I think, to the interior of the sentiment piece or the title piece. And now I think we're going to add a couple little spots on the sketch where it showed that there were just tiny elements or small elements. I think one little deer peeking out of the stone. And now we can work a little bit on some larger foliage to fill that little gap there and make the flourishes look like they're coming up out of the page. I love the elements here where you don't have super symmetrical bits and pieces, but you still have a nice clean layout with larger photos. So I'm going to add some of the foliage pieces. I've got a couple of those Cajun craze sprigs. I have a pecan pie fern and then mossy meadow pine. And then over on the right, I think this is a great landing spot for the die-cut deer that come out of the autumn trees. And I think we can toggle with a couple of the stamped stones. So we'll put one of the stones behind the deer flush, and then we'll put one of the stones popped up in front. And I truly think filling in the foliage is all we need. Of course, no layout is complete without a little bit of bling. And I've been in love, love, love with the wooden, they're like a wooden dot. They look like wood to me, and they're called a streaked dot. I love them. So we're going to add a few little, maybe 3 around each cluster. I think I might even add a few at the bottom in the transition before the stitching down on the bottom, just to draw attention to that down on the bottom a little bit. Add another little element of interest, and guess what? I'm getting happy. I'm getting happy. I really love the simplicity of this, and yet all of the detail, the lines, the journal lines, the inking on the edges, all of those little things really add up. So let's take a look and see if we did the sketch justice. We have our hexagons, we have our journal spot, we have our title spot. I did leave off one little strip. We have our stitching on the bottom. I love it. I hope you'll hit more in the description and click on the playlist to see all the other creative ladies and their take on the same sketch. It's so much fun to see all the different versions. I hope you'll hit like, subscribe, the notifications bell, shoot me a comment, and come back soon for more.